During a 2-year reign of terror across the UK, a gang of ruthless robbers targeted high security depots and cash-in-transit vans.
The guy was on the floor, he was lay on the floor with his hands like this, and he's got a shotgun at his head.
Their method was elaborate and unique, creating devastation in their wake.
There was a huge skip-type vehicle with a ram which had been welded on the front of it, which had been deliberately driven into the wall of the depot.
But each time they struck, they left vital clues, allowing the police to be right on their trail.
They'd actually put a bullet through the window of a Securicore van. Big mistake.
All culminating in one of the biggest showdowns in criminal history.
They came across a firearms vehicle and the robbers stole that vehicle,
making this one of Britain's biggest heists. The 19th of October 1995, Heists, Salford. Detective Constable Mike Hawkins from the Greater Manchester Police Robbery Unit is called to an urgent job.
Upon arrival, I was greeted with carnage, really, for want of a better way of putting it. There was a huge skip-type vehicle which had been deliberately driven into the wall of the depot. So, as you can imagine, the wall of the depot was pretty much non-existent anymore.
A ruthless gang had their sights on the large sums of money stored at the top security depot and stopped at nothing to get it.
The wall that was driven into had a direct access into the vault. The vault could sometimes hold millions of pounds. So it really was a case of fill your boots as fast as you can at the scene for those involved and flee before the police arrived.
Three armed men went into the vault. The staff were terrified. One man got a sawn-off shotgun put to his head, and they're shouting at them. And there's no need. It's just totally pointless violence. The men were frightened, they were compliant, and the staff were on the floor, they weren't doing anything. And then one of them put a bullet through the roof.
In less than 2 minutes, the armed gang had ransacked the place and fled with a major amount of cash.
There was a huge amount of money which was stolen from the raid, £770,000 in total, which was a lot of cash for those who committed this type of crime to be able to steal.
It's a heavy hit for the cash-in-transit industry to take. Earlier that year, there'd been a £6.5 million robbery at a depot in Salford. Securicore suffered that loss. And these types of robberies were of the order that the industry couldn't sustain them. If we didn't take this team out, we would probably have seen the collapse of the cash-in-transit industry.
This was no ordinary robbery. It had been pre-planned. There's obviously quite a lot of thought gone into the process by those who were involved, and it was very much different than your normal type robbery.
The police needed to act fast. With a vehicle left at the scene and a firearm discharged inside, forensic officers set off to work.
We had the bullet that had been put through the roof, quite a significant piece of evidence, and we had that analysed at the firearms laboratory. That then gives us a key, and that can link us to other scenes, to other robberies. As it happened, this would appear to be the first time that this weapon had been used, and there were no other discharges on record.
No leads had come from the bullet, but the investigation team kept the information on file. Yet other items left behind proved to be vital clues.
We were able to recover what's known as a tachograph, which gives some indication around the journey that the vehicle has taken.
A tachograph is a device found in large vehicles that measures the speed, distance, and duration of a journey.
Fortunately, it hadn't been in the vehicle for too long, so it hadn't been overscored repeatedly.
And we were able to determine from that tachograph that the vehicle had come from close to that location, an industrial park in Radcliffe.
This was a major breakthrough. The police had a specific location where the vehicle had possibly been stored, Beeley Industrial Estate. And this wasn't the first time it had been on their radar.
We'd had an attack at Pilsworth in Bury. The attack was outside the cinema. A white Transit blocked the front of the cash-in-transit van, and then it'd been rammed from the rear by a modified Land Rover. The Land Rover itself had been stolen from Rottendale. They'd made a right mess of the Securicorps van, but they weren't successful and didn't get away with any cash. What they'd welded on the front of that was like a ram with a plate on the front of that, and I've got to say he had a bit of a sense of humour. Because what he'd done on the front of the Land Rover when it'd been pinched on the grille, there was a horseshoe. And what he did was he welded the horseshoe on the front of the ram. Another significant attack that became relevant for us was at Tesco's in Mather Avenue in Liverpool. What happened there is a flatback wagon had been used, and that had been stolen from Rochdale. Again, that's not far from Pilsworth. The gang had welded a sort of a crossed spike onto the back of this vehicle. And what this vehicle had done then, it had then reversed into a waiting Securicorps van. And in the cab of this was a tachograph. So what the scientists did then was then piece together the journey that this vehicle had taken over those intervening days. They were able to take us to an industrial estate in Radcliffe, Beeley Industrial Estate.
So evidence from 2 previous robberies in Bury and Liverpool linked back to this place in Radcliffe. These small units were now of major importance to this growing investigation. And another aspect of the robberies was recurring each time.
What we found was another significant feature was that there was an M-Series BMW used as the getaway vehicle, and that vehicle was later found abandoned in Garston in Liverpool.
With these common features, a worrying pattern was now emerging.
We were aware that there was a potential for a series developing here. We'd had an attack at Pilsworth in Bury, not far from the industrial estate. We knew that they'd stolen a vehicle from Rochdale. Again, that's not too far off. And we knew that they were using a venue to house these vehicles in. You can't just stand on the street welding a ram on the front of a van or a Land Rover. Somebody would probably ring it in because it looks suspicious. So to actually have a potential venue for us was quite exciting.
Now the business park was a main line of inquiry, thanks to the tachographs found at Salford and Liverpool.
I can't tell you how significant Beeley Industrial Estate was to us at that time.
But the large estate housed many businesses, so honing in on one particular base could prove to be tricky.
There was lots of different industrial units on there, lots of different types of industry taking place in there, some small units, some big units. Any one of them could have housed a vehicle, any one of them could have been used for welding. And we couldn't let the robbers know that we were actually not far off them now. Had we started to make open investigations at Beeley Industrial Estate, whoever they were using on that estate would have told the robbers and they'd have moved. And our task now was to actually see what else we could get with a view to identifying the unit that we're using, then we could start mounting technical attacks upon them.
One wrong move could blow the operation before any further intelligence was gathered. But gradually, information directed them to a specific area.
Units 9, 9A and 9B was a key point for us, a real key point in the investigation.
It was quite possible they'd use the same location time after time, and were able to narrow down significantly where the vehicle originated from.
We had a specific location now, and when we started to look at this, it became more and more clear to us that this was the place they were using, this is the place where the welding was taking place, and this is the place they were storing the stolen vehicles.
Undercover officers were deployed to stake out the units and discover who exactly was behind the vehicles.
It can be quite complicated to set up an observation post without anyone else being aware, not just those who are involved in the crime, but other people, because that attracts attention. So we've got to make sure that we're able to get in and out on a regular basis, if need be, without people seeing us.
So over the coming days, the investigation continued. We started to build our evidential case. We started to see factors that became significant. We start to see people appearing, and the most regular attender at Beeley Industrial Estate was a guy called David Fletcher.
David Fletcher, 34 years old, from Manchester, a welder with no previous convictions and not known to the police.
David Fletcher was the welder who operated and rented the premises.
With no further intelligence on Fletcher, officers continued their surveillance, and gradually more faces became familiar at the industrial estate.
We start then to spread out to other members of the gang. We had Lawrence Brown, or Loz Brown, who turned up on a number of occasions.
Lawrence Brown, 36 years old, from Salford, a known robber who had a track record with Greater Manchester Police.
He lived in a house in Earlham under Heights. He got previous convictions for wagon theft. It was actually on bail at the time that we started to look at him for trying to steal a wagon in Stockport. He tried to assault the officers. See from the picture, I think he came off worse.
Crucially, a key element from the Salford heist now placed Brown in the frame.
We had the BMW that was the M-Series that was abandoned near Lawrence Brown's house.
This vehicle was picked up and became vital evidence. Officers also discovered that the HGV used in this latest robbery had been stolen from Swinton, just a few miles from Brown's house. Now, two local lads, Brown and Fletcher, were in the officers' sights, but more intelligence was needed and time was running out.
And we start to drill into the detail around them. You start with where do they live, who do we know that visits them, what can we gain by watching the house, who's attending at the house, what phone number are they using, who they're ringing, who's ringing them. And then you start to branch that out, and that's where the investigation led us into Graham Dorian. Dorian was actually the brother of Brown's common-law wife.
Graham Dorian was a 32-year-old local lad with a criminal past.
Graham Dorian is from Salford. He was a boxer and trained in local gyms.
No obvious means of support, no obvious means of income on benefits, and was regularly seen at the Brown household. Loz Brown and Graham Dorian spent a lot of time together, appear to be quite good friends.
Surveillance now flagged up three men from Greater Manchester who clearly knew each other. And delving into phone activity, uncovered a deeper network.
We did come to use cell sighting. What you could do was, as people tracked across the country, their phones would give an electronic handshake to different cell sites in the same way that a piece would move across the chessboard.
And this cell sighting was to highlight a lot of activity coming from certain phones 30 miles away in Liverpool. One phone linked to Kevin Kennedy, a 27-year-old with previous history for robbery.
Kevin Kennedy, he lived on an estate in Speke. He, again, no visible means of support, no income. We also then had a guy called David Hill who kept featuring on the phone billing that we were looking at.
David Hill was a 46-year-old previously known to Merseyside police.
Couldn't quite understand what his involvement was to start with, and he lived in the sort of south side of Liverpool.
Officers now had a link between three Manchester lads and two Liverpudlians, but separate gangs associating together was rare, if not unheard of. Then another man came onto their radar. Andrew Scroggy, a 28-year-old previously known to police.
Scroggy was a Birmingham lad who was very much linked into David Hill and the Liverpool side. And he did feature at Loz Brown's house on one occasion, and we saw him in and out of the garages. They had a couple of lock-up garages in Garston, which they also came to use to store stolen cars in that, and we had him and Kevin Kennedy going to and from the garages.
Certain men were now identified, and a link was emerging between Manchester, Birmingham, and Liverpool.
I've never seen a gang since operating this way. It's very rare that you get gangs which come together, if you like, from two different or three different parts of the country, even Manchester, Liverpool and Birmingham. The whole setup of the gang, the way in which they operated, it was completely unique.
But police still had nothing more to go on other than phone records and association from the surveillance conducted. Yet officers could tell things were gearing up again at the units.
We saw a skip wagon going in. That straight away puts us on our alert. We don't know what they're doing with it, but we're looking at a team that modifies HGVs. For our money, it was going to be used in an attack, and that's what they were building to. So we start to build forward, we start to stand to. As we're building to look to, do we need to arrest, should we be going in under a warrant? We've got the premises under observation and the skip wagon comes out. And it's like, oh my God, what are we going to do?
A prolific gang of armed robbers have stolen almost £1 million from a security depot in Salford and attempted at least 2 more heists but failed. Greater Manchester police are watching their every move and biding their time. But the thieves are on the go once more, and this time a depot in Bolton is their target.
What we then did, we mounted a sort of loose surveillance and took it to the Bolton area, and all we could do was just stop them. They didn't know that we were onto them, and the last thing we wanted was to blow this at this point in the investigation. So what we did, we got high-profile response in the Bolton area, and it was abandoned and the team made off, and they left it not far from the Securicorps depot, so we'd actually prevented a robbery. Again, we had significant recoveries in relation to the skip wagon. It was this one where I saw the welder's sense of humour come to the fore again. He'd welded an L, like a learner plate, on the back of the wagon. Straight away, as soon as I saw it, I thought, this is the same guy who's done Pillsworth. It's the same weld it's got to be. Because it's very unusual to see that sort of humour display within an armed robbery team.
Now, with 3 failed robberies, the police were certain it was the same gang in action each time, but couldn't connect the Liverpool team with Manchester other than by phone records, until a piece of intelligence led them to a prison in Warrington.
Loz Brown had tried to steal a wagon and assaulted an officer. He got 3 months, and that put a spanner in the works, shall I say, for the investigation, because if he's in prison, we can't follow him. What we did get from that was probably one of the breaks that came to the investigation. We got information that there was going to be a visit to Loz Brown, and the visit came in the form of, it was Graham Dorian from Manchester, Kevin Kennedy turned up from Liverpool. Absolute manna from heaven. It put the 2 teams together. We got physical association between Manchester and Liverpool for the first time, and it was a real air-punching moment. Yes, we got them together.
We liaised on a regular basis with Merseyside Police, but we also worked quite closely with the National Crime Squad. But it was a balancing act, really, around what we could tell other forces and even certain members of our own force to make sure that the information which we knew was kept as sensitive as possible.
The team were now linked and on camera, but still needed to be caught in the act.
Brown comes out of prison, and we see them start in the process of setting up what appears to be like a scaffolding firm. And then we have Brown and Dorian, Lawrence Brown and Graham Dorian, go to Liverpool.
No sooner is Lawrence Brown out of prison, the gang seem to be organising yet another job.
They drive off, they get on the M6. We thought they were going to London, perhaps to do a bit of work. Might have been to do with the scaffolding, didn't really know. Got to Birmingham and we pulled the surveillance.
As officers stood down, Brown and Dorian made their way down south for the weekend.
Saturday morning, I was at home, remember it. They went down to Dartford in Kent and robbed a Securicor depot. Got £440,000. And I was absolutely livid. We'd missed a real golden opportunity, a real golden egg that had gone. And if we'd been with him, we could have had him. And it really hurt, that, really hurt.
The gang had now racked up at least 5 armed raids up and down the country, starting on their patch, but now terrorizing other parts of the UK. They'd walked away from 2 heists with a total of £1.1 million and showed no signs of stopping. With this latest theft, the police had been caught off guard, but all was not lost.
They'd actually put a bullet through the window of a Securicor van. Big mistake for them, because that helped us to forensically link them to the robbery at Heist. Same gun, same bullet, markings.
And the phone traffic painted a very interesting picture.
The first thing we see, and it's quite comical really, is after the robberies, they're on the way home, they all start ringing their wives and partners and girlfriends. But we didn't have the cell sighting as evidence, it was intelligence, and that was a frustration for us. That would have probably nailed the hats on.
It's fair to say that the gang had grown in reputation and size by that time. Obviously, they'd been committing these offences, and we were somewhere 2 years down the line, I should say, which gives you an indication of how professional they were in respect to the robberies that they were committing as well. Because by that time, we'd pretty much identified who the individuals that were involved, and it was just a matter, really, of catching them, if you like, in the act.
Resources are pulled in from all around the country to get more intelligence on the gang and step up surveillance. And before long, another twist appears.
They were following Brown, and he drives down to Bute Street, which is not far from the Heist depot that they'd robbed in Salford. And as the surveillance officers are watching him, he gets out of his car and he climbs on the roof of what appear to be an industrial premises that are actually to let. And he pulls some of the shuttering away from the side, and he goes inside. And this is like, well, what's going on here? As it happens, Fletcher was coming to the end of his lease. I think he was behind with his rent as well, which was a problem for him. He had quite significant financial problems at the time. And then they actually came to lease it. Fletcher leased the unit, and the robbery team relocated to Heist, to Bute Street.
The gang now had a new base, suggesting the intention to continue their crime spree. Officers needed to know their next plan and be one step ahead, so special measures were resorted to.
So we started to do our own covert entries he'd been in, so we decided we'd go in and have a look as well, all properly warranted. And we actually installed various cameras within the premises.
But with this covert operation came huge risks.
We got a bit concerned when you start leaving hard copy devices in places. You've got risks. Brown actually came right up to one of them, and we thought he was going to swallow it. He got that close to it.
One of Britain's largest police operations is tracking a violent gang intent on fleecing the country's security system of millions of pounds. Officers have already missed a vital opportunity to catch the raiders at a depot in Kent and cannot afford to be caught off guard again. Now the cunning team are in their sights, but to bring them down will take major resources, particularly at the hub of the criminal network.
We'd done that by installing a number of covert cameras at the location, which also included inside the unit, and we were able to monitor the cameras from a distance of about 5–10 miles away in order to watch when they were coming and going and what was going on inside the unit without anybody taking any unnecessary risks, if you like, in the locality.
We got a bit concerned when you start leaving hard copy devices in places. You've got risks. And we decided that the chances are that if we leave them there, they might get found. And if they get found, we've had it. And the point at which we decided to remove them, Brown actually came right up to one of them, and we thought he was going to swallow it. He got that close to it, and it was a case of, right, let's get the cameras out, that's enough, we're not risking this anymore.
Officers had come within inches of being discovered, but despite having to pull this part of the operation, the footage captured told an incredible story.
And we see stolen HGV going. So we keep monitoring the progress on this, thinking, right, they're at it again. This is going to be the next robbery vehicle. They paint it, and we keep going and having a look at what's going on. And then they start to rip the floor out of the inside of the back, exposing the cross members. And then what we see being built slowly over a period of days is a ram, a telescopic ram. They'd repainted it. I think they'd repainted it white from blue. You could pull the roll shutter door down and you'd be none the wiser. Lift the roll shutter door up and you can pull the ram out and you could put locking pins in it. And there you had an effective and viable device.
And taking no chances, undercover officers continued the surveillance once the cameras were removed.
We'd have specially trained officers to get into premises and gather evidence. We'd have a layer of protection around them, and then what they'd do, they'd go in and they'd take photographs, they'd record their observations, they'd take pictures of the ram, and they took pictures of the van, general pictures, and so that when they were coming back to us to tell us what had happened, it was like, yeah, and this is what we've seen. Very rare for you to actually witness an offence taking place. What's even rarer is to be in the position that we were in, where we're watching them prepare, and the evidential opportunities that we came across there were huge.
For weeks, vital information was fed back to the robbery unit, and it was clear preparations were being made for another hit. Then Mike and his team received crucial intelligence.
We had an indication that they were about to commit a further offence in Poole in Dorset.
They set off in convoy. Scroggy leaves Bute Street in the HGV and they all start to travel south. And we're following Scroggy because he's in the vehicle with the ram. That's the one that we're going to stay with because that's the one that's going to be there when the robbery happens, and that's where we want to be.
Travelling the length of the country meant nationwide cooperation from each police force and a massive operation. On top of this, officers faced a dilemma.
The problem which we had were that there was a number of depots which could have been the intended target, and we hadn't got specific information as to which depot that would be. We were able to identify 3 in the locality.
The gang could strike at any of the 3 vaults, and officers knew they were prone to violence, but time was running out and dozens of staff could be in grave danger.
We've told the staff in all 3 vaults, just lock it down, get yourself somewhere secure, and stay tight, stay safe till we get there.
As the depot staff quickly scrambled to safety, a shock was in store.
So we were literally on the phone at the time when the wagon was driven into the wall.
We have one of our officers on the phone, and in the conversation, you can actually hear this shuddering crunch as the wall gets breached. And you can hear the panic in the employee's voice. The penny's dropping, this is happening, and it's happening here to me. Terrifying place to be in, but he was safe, he was perfectly safe where he was.
The member of staff was incredibly surprised as to what was happening and the fact that he got a police officer on the phone who was describing the events that were going to happen to him at the time they were actually happening.
The 3 robbers go in, one waits outside in the M-Series BMW.
Well, the unfortunate thing for them was they were greeted with nothing. Much to their surprise, there were no staff on the premises, and to some extent we've been able to secure the money. So having gone to all the trouble of driving all the way down to Poole in Dorset, driving the wagon through the wall, they were left with absolutely nothing, so I should imagine they had a rather look of surprise on their face.
And they try to get into the vault. They can't because it's all been locked down. And then you hear a rapid succession of gunshots. It's very rare, probably unheard of, to have a member of staff from a cash in transit vault on the phone to a police officer whilst it's being robbed. Virtually, I've never known it happen before, and I doubt I ever will again.
Despite a futile attempt to shoot the lock from the vault door, there was no way of getting to the cash. Empty-handed, the Ruthless gang were now within the premises, and it was time for the police to close in.
What we're doing at this time is the resources, the firearms resources have been mobilised, and they're starting to be called in to actually confront these men with a firearms team.
Despite an incredible amount of effort, the thieves were now helpless and could not reach the cash now safely locked in the vault. It seemed like this time, the police were one step ahead.
We'd received information that the 4 robbers had been detained and that they'd not stolen anything from the depot. So if you can imagine, the champagne corks were popping at the headquarters.
But the celebrations were short-lived.
They'd been thwarted, really. They're frustrated in their attempts to steal any cash this time. Come out of the vault, jump into the M-Series BMW and make off. Unfortunately, the HGV had blocked the road, and our firearms team was on one side and the BMW was on the other.
This was now the gang's 6th armed attack, and despite the police being so close, they'd somehow managed to get away.
And 2 minutes later, we get a call to say nobody's been detained.
I'm not going to believe this. They got it wrong. They've got away. Oh.
With the gang armed, dangerous, and on the loose, officers were under immense pressure to find them, and fast.
What then happens is, for whatever reason, they abandoned that BMW because they didn't have another vehicle. What they do then is they disappear off into the gardens of the nearby houses.
What actually happened at that point was an unmarked car. The officers that were inside the car, all suitably firearms trained, were also dressed in civilian or plain clothes. The robbers approached that vehicle probably thinking they were members of the public. They placed their firearms up against the window of the car and instructed the firearms officers to open the car and get out. The firearms officers, obviously fearing for their lives at that stage, quite rightly so, then vacated their vehicle. And the robbers stole that vehicle.
You're never going to believe what's happened.
Greater Manchester Police are in the throes of bringing down one of the most prolific gangs ever to hit the UK. Having received intelligence about their next hit, officers race to Poole in Dorset to arrest the thieves in action. But the result is far from what was anticipated. The gang leave the vault empty-handed, but manage to flee the scene.
They come across a Dorset armed response vehicle that was on the outer perimeter. The officers in it have got no idea what's happening. The first thing they see is a guy at my door. He had a gun at my head. I remember the officer who sat on the back seat, and she said she did consider drawing a weapon. The problem was they were in a built-up area. Now, if she'd have started shooting and they'd have started shooting, bullets could have gone anywhere, and you could have had members of the public shot and, God forbid, killed. So yeah, they made off the Dorset armed response vehicle.
The irony of it is at that stage, the robbers didn't even know that they had stolen a firearms police car.
With the gang on the loose, each officer knew of the dangers ahead.
What we're going to do? They've got away. again. So it's start again, start from scratch.
Looks like the move's on the top of that. Right.
We felt incredibly disappointed, as you'll appreciate. This had been an investigation which had been running for years, and to think for 1 minute that everybody had been arrested, and then to find out 2 minutes later that nobody had been arrested and they'd kidnapped a firearms car was incredibly disappointing for the investigation.
The registration's checked.
It's fair to say at that point that the cavalry were turned out. We had marked police vehicles which were swamping the area around Poole and Dorset. The police helicopter was sent up to conduct observations. And we were able to ascertain in a reasonably short space of time that they'd abandoned the firearms vehicle and were now in and around the south of the UK on foot.
Teams of officers scoured the south of the country to locate the robbers.
Sometime after the robbery had been committed on that evening, we were able to ascertain through CCTV that two of the individuals who were responsible for the offence, Lawrence Brown and Graham Dorian, had found their way to Euston Station in London.
With this lead, it was critical for the police to consider their next move and close in at the right moment.
And it was apparent at that stage that they were making their way back to the northwest. And it was highly likely that they were going to do that by catching a train at Euston to Manchester. So we tried to get ahead of the game again and see if we could deploy firearms officers. Problem which we had was the train was due to arrive on a Friday night around 11 p.m, which, as you can imagine, is a very busy time. So it wasn't possible to deploy firearms officers.
They are watched very closely. We note that they're carrying 2 holdalls, one each. Quite bulky holdalls. The next thing, we have a sighting of them outside Corner House, which is the picture house in Manchester.
It was an incredible pressure cooker situation within the control room. We've got 2 individuals who are armed, who are travelling up to Manchester. We've got them under surveillance by officers who are not armed.
With the lack of firearms officers around to assist, Mike and his team had to make a split-second decision.
We were left in a dilemma, really, as to what to do with the 2 individuals. So the investigation team, following a very brief discussion, decided that if need be, we would effect the arrest ourselves. And that carried a huge degree of risk at the time. But such was the desire, coupled with the frustration of the investigation team, that we made a decision that night that we were going to arrest them.
Show's on. Yeah, we're going to do it ourselves. Over.
This was an opportunity which didn't arise very often. If we couldn't catch them at the scene, the next best thing to do was to catch them away from the scene, still in possession of the firearms. Bear in mind, there'd be a huge amount of forensic evidence which would be available to us if we got them that night.
And they went out to Corner House, got out of the cars, parked up, and then came round the corner, acting like a group of Saturday night drunks.
And it literally happened in a matter of seconds. We were close enough with the instruction that was given by the officer who was nearest to the 2 individuals, and very quickly we had 8 to 10 police officers who had jumped on these 2 individuals. They were forced to the floor, and we were able to disarm them pretty quickly. There was quite a violent struggle which happened. As I say, they were in possession of firearms, so we were able really to justify what we were doing.
After 2 years following this prolific gang throughout the country, it culminated in a dramatic showdown back in Manchester. With Dorian and Brown now finally arrested, the team had their sights on the other perpetrators.
Fletcher's house is searched. And not only have we got him on surveillance of the 2 units, we've actually got a sketch, you know. He's got a drawing of the ram he's constructed, hand-drawn by him in his house. So get out of that one, you know. We've got Dorian and Brown, and we've got Fletcher. all charged with a conspiracy.
3 weeks ago. Anybody with a black BMW?
And it was some time before we were able to locate Kennedy and Scroggy.
For the record, you're saying no. So this
Scroggy was eventually detained overseas and he was brought back to the UK to answer the allegations.
pictures that show you. Nice.
Kevin Kennedy had fled to Amsterdam.
As officers liaised with the police in Amsterdam, 4 of the gang members went on trial.
We went to trial in that November of 1996 with Dorian, Brown, Scroggy and Fletcher. Fletcher pleaded guilty at the outset.
I've got a photograph of them.
2 years and 6 violent attacks on, 4 of the gang were found guilty of their crimes. Lawrence Brown received 20 years imprisonment. Graham Dorian, 16. Andrew Scroggy, 12, reduced to 10 on appeal. And David Fletcher, 5 years for their parts in the robberies. Now, the mission was to find the rest of the elusive gang and recover any of the missing millions.
We had a breakthrough really towards the end of the criminal investigation as to what they were doing with the money.
We start to see that they're all getting huge cheques, 20, 30,000 from bookies. So what's all this about? They can't all be successful gamblers.
Yeah, Steve, it's Mike. Listen, I think I'm onto something with these money transfers.
Before long, another man entered the frame. Jason Metcalfe, a 24-year-old money launderer from Aintree who had connections with the side of the gang in Liverpool.
He was a compulsive gambler, but he would bet on short order events, football matches, cricket matches. He would place accumulators. And although he was still losing, wasn't losing an awful lot, and he was losing approximately 10 to 15%, which, as far as a launderer is concerned, is highly efficient.
This method of money laundering was new to the police, and as such, the gang had so far managed to fly below the radar and minimize the risk of losing their spoils. Metcalfe's intricate knowledge of the betting system meant a lesser chance of losing it all to the bookies.
We went through a painstaking analysis of betting slips, over 1,000 betting slips, to try and actually work out how much Jason had won or lost whilst he'd been conducting this process. He used to walk into the bookmakers with anything up to £30,000, £40,000 in any one day. And bet away with that. I mean, the trick with money laundering is to hide it away from the authorities as best they can. So rather than Mr. Brown receiving a cheque for £50,000 on a regular basis from the bookmakers, which might alert suspicions, they found other people who were prepared to take cheques of £5,000, £10,000, sometimes as much as £50,000, and they'd keep it in a bank account with the intention of transferring it at a later stage.
The gang's method of filtering the money had allowed them to go undetected for some time, but now unearthed led the police to further leads.
We start to move into looking at the other members of the robbery team. We arrest David Hill, and he's brought in, interviewed, and he's charged, goes to trial, as was Metcalfe. It's also around this time that we identify where Kevin Kennedy's gone, and he was staying in a flat on Singel in Amsterdam. It was actually cheaper to hire a private jet to bring him in, and we brought him into a small airfield where he was met by a firearms convoy and taken straight to the police station, then to jail.
Greater Manchester Police now had who they believed to be the ringleader in Hill and the money launderer with Metcalfe. As they went on trial, Kennedy was brought back to the UK and decided to talk.
Kennedy entered a guilty plea. I think Kennedy got 16 years. Hill got 20 years. And Jason Metcalfe was convicted on 3 specimen charges of money laundering, got 5 years on each.
So we were very pleased that all those years of efforts had resulted in lengthy prison sentences.
And having traced where the stolen cash was being fed to, the the team got one of the rarest results in criminal history.
All in all, we recovered about £990,000. And if you remember, there was £1.1 million in cash taken. We recovered almost all of it. Hugely successful recovery. And that went back to Securicorp and Armaguard.
Money is the lifeblood of all crime, predominantly. And it's nice to think that when they serve the years, they'll essentially be coming out to nothing.